Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at RB01, and RB01 has a few new decks for us to look and examine, and today's deck that I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on the Jellymon deck. So if you're unfamiliar with the Jellymon deck, it's been around for a while, but it hasn't really come into full form until this set. So Jellymon is just doing your classic blue thing, where it has some pretty decent tools that blue is playing around with and known for, like attacking multiple times, stripping the opponent's resources, stunning their Digimon, bouncing their cards back to their hand, and Jellymon even has its own unique twist on wanting you to discard some of your cards and recycling some cards that are in your trash for various other abilities. The biggest weakness to this deck is, well, the fact that it has no natural DP boosting means that it's a little bit weak against large bodies that are able to stop your potential aggro, on top of the reliance on utilizing the jamming ability to make your attacks as safe as they possibly can. This deck, compared to the other RB1 decks, is going to be on the more competitive side, but at the end of the day, it's still rogue to casual at best. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the eggs, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Jellymon as the main Digitama for the deck. I already am going to be wanting to play a decent amount of Tamers, so Jellymon helps us draw some cards, which is actually important to try to up the consistency of the deck, especially since we want to also try to discard cards, so we need to see more cards to, well, discard. And then I am going to be running a 5th Digitama. The 5th Digitama is optional, and this could even be your main Digitama if you really wanted to, just because it plays into the overall gameplay or game plan of what the deck is trying to do, where it's just a nice inheritable ability that's allowing you to not only just trash your cards in your hand, which could be good on lining up specific abilities, but also trashing one of the opponent's Digimon's inheritable sources to be able to try to have more reach in terms of how much you could try to strip at any given point. Next, on to the level 3s, I'm just going to be running a relatively simple Jellymon lineup. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of the promo Jellymon for its inheritable ability to help us draw a card as long as we have the designated tamer in play. I'm going to be running 4 copies of the RB01 Jellymon just as the deck's dedicated digging tool for our other Jellymon based cards and our main tamer. Then it also has a nice resource generation ability when we're going to be discarding some cards in our hand due to some of our various other card effects to make us as tempo efficient as possible. Then the last Jellymon could kind of be whatever Jellymon you feel like you want to use. I just feel like the BT13 one is actually pretty good because it has some nice built-in protection with the evade ability, so that way it has some resilience on being able to keep a body on board, on top of the fact that its inheritable ability is not limited to once per turn when attacking trigger to try to trash as many cards in the opponent's inheritables as we possibly can, just because a lot of what Jellymon is trying to do is line up as many attacks as it possibly can. Next, on to the level 4s. I'm going to be running 4 copies of the BT13 Tesla Jellymon. This has a nice when attacking ability to try to help us draw some cards for when we're discarding some of our cards due to our other abilities, on top of the fact that it also has that same not limited to once per turn when attacking inheritable to trash cards off the bottom of the opponent's Digivolution source. Then I'm going to be running 4 copies of the RB1 Tesla Jellymon, just because this is going to be able to help play and set up our tamer if we already don't have one, which is really nice, on top of the fact that it is also doing what's the RB01 Jellymon is doing on its inheritable for some extra memory generation when we're discarding cards. And then the last 2 champions could really be anything you feel like you want it to be. I'm just going to be using 2 copies of Lanamon just because Lanamon actually has some pretty decent synergy with the deck, outside of the fact that it's not a Jellymon based card. So it is a hybrid, so that way we do have the ability to Digivolve on top of our Tamers to be able to get some sneak attacks in. Then the when Digivolving ability can help put a Jellymon underneath to be able to use Jellymon's inheritable abilities, so that way we could try to optimize our cards as best as we possibly can, on top of the fact that it's also going to be gaining the jamming ability, which is really important, so that way our Digimon, when when we're being aggressive with it, can have as high of a chance to live as it possibly can, swinging into the opponent's security, and this does carry over through the levels, so if you do need to use it as an evolution point, it's still just a very solid card for us to have. Next, on to the level 5s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the RB01 Tethysmon. So the RB1 Tethysmon is another card to just help try to trash cards from our hand to trigger some of our various other card effects, while also trying to trash cards underneath the opponent's Tamers or Digimon, which is really important because we're actually starting to interact with the opponent's Tamers, which not a lot of decks in the game have at this point, which adds to why I think Jellymon is going to be a little bit more on the competitive side, especially since it's allowing us to also keep the opponent's Digimon or Tamers from suspending, so it potentially locks them out of their potential usage. Then on top of that, it has a nice inheritable ability for us to take advantage of that's actually increasing the overall aggression of the deck, and one of the reasons why we're trying to discard cards is because at the end of our attack, we get to return 3 cards with Jellymon in their text from our trash to the bottom of our deck to be able to unsuspend this Digimon, to be able to allow us to multi-attack to begin with. Then as far as the other ultimates of the deck, I'm going to be running 3 copies of the BT13 Tethysmon. This is really good just to have the potential at being able to warp up into this Digimon, so that way we could try to have consistency on being able to climb our stages, and it has that same exact end of attack ability that we just saw with the other Tethysmon, so it's just there for the consistency of that ability. But if you wanted to, you could even think about running a 4th copy of this card, but instead I'm going to be opting to run at least 1 copy of the BT10 Tethysmon as a way to be able to try to draw some extra cards in case our hand is low from when we're discarding when we digivolve up into this card, and the fact that she also is another pretty decent card at allowing us to aggro as hard as we possibly can, where as long as we have 8 or more cards in our hand, we could trash 2 of them to be able to unsuspend this Digimon, which we could then use to try to line up those multiple attacks. And then when it comes to the level 6s, we're just going to go for a very simple Amphimon lineup. So the main Amphimon is going to be 4 copies of the Resurgence Amphimon, which this card is really insane on how strong it could be because we're going to be trashing 2 blue cards from our hand, whether we're digivolving or attacking, and it's not once per turn, so we could digivolve, attack, and get this ability twice. And then for each card that we're trashing, we get to trash 1 card from underneath one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers, so we could try to strip them down, and then we get to return one of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources to the bottom of their deck. So this is going to allow us to have some extra control when we're going up, and allowing us to discard some cards so we could try to use the cards in our trash to be able to line up our extra attacks and other abilities. Then she even has a nice all turns ability where once per turn, when one of your blue Digimon would be deleted, then we get to return 3 cards with Jellymon in their text from our trash to the bottom of our deck in any order to prevent the deletion. So we even have some nice built-in protection against deletion to be able to try to keep our card around as long as we possibly can. Then the supporting mega for the deck is going to be 2 copies of the promo Amphimon, and compared to the other promos that we got for the Ghost Game megas, I actually think this is the strongest one of that bunch. So when we digivolve into this card, we get to trash up to 3 blue cards from our hand, which again we already established is not that big of a deal. And then for each one that we trash, we get to trash any 1 card underneath one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers. So we get to selectively choose what we're trashing. It's not just going to be from the bottom, and the fact that this can impact the Tamers is also really nice, again, in case that they have inheritable sources underneath their Tamer. Then, until the end of the opponent's turn, one of their Digimon or Tamers, so without any Digivolution sources, can't suspend, again trying to lock them down from being able to utilize their cards. Then this card even has a nice ability that triggers during the opponent's turn once per turn. When an opponent's Digimon attacks, we can return 3 cards with Jellymon in their text from our trash to the bottom to just end the attack, again having some alternative ways to be able to defend against what the opponent could potentially be threatening us with. And then as far as the level 7 of the deck goes, you don't technically have to run a level 7 if you don't want to, but I'm just going to be running one copy of the classic BT5 Omnimon just as an alternative win condition, just because when we get the opponent's security low enough, or they basically don't have any security, then we could just use this card to basically get an extra attack to close out games with. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running an all Kyoshiro lineup. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of the brand new Kyoshiro, just because he's a pretty decent draw engine that triggers both during our turn and on the opponent's turn. And then on top of that, while he's going to be unsuspending during our turn, then we're going to be gaining an extra memory to be able to try to enhance and extend some of our plays. Then I'm going to be running 2 copies of the BT9 Kyoshiro, so this is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer to make sure that we're always at 3 memory to make our plays as efficient as possible. Then on top of that, he also is going to be helping us draw some extra cards, just because we're going to also try to discard cards quite often when we're in our higher stages, so we need to have alternative ways to be able to refresh our hand as best as we possibly can. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be the promo Kyoshiro. So this is really good for applying jamming on our Digimon as long as it has a Jellymon in its Digivolution source, so that way we could try to make our attacks as safe as we possibly can when we're trying to aggro, which is super important because we can line up multiple attacks and we want to make sure our Digimon can live through all of them. And then when it comes to the options, we do have some pretty flexible options that we could play around with. I decided to settle on 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost just for some added consistency and that extra memory later on when we need it. Then I'm going to be running 2 copies of Sorai as my removal card. It's not exactly removal because it's not dealing with any of the threats that is going to be on the opponent's field, but having more instances of being able to trash the opponent's inheritable sources is still going to be pretty useful, especially since this adds the extra ability where their Digimon without any Digivolution sources can't attack, which could be super important for various different matchups. But if you did just want to run a bounce removal card, then this would be the slot to replace that with. Then on top of that, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Ice Wall because, well, it's Ice Wall. It's so good that it did get limited to 1, which is why we can only run 1, but it's still just good at being able to buy us an extra turn by taxing all of the opponent's potential attacks from any of their Digimon coming out of anywhere. But for the most part, that's it for the main deck, and as far as other cards that we could think about utilizing, Jellymon does have various different tech and tools that we can incorporate to try to enhance what the deck is capable of based on the meta and the playstyle and the cards that you have access to. So we could think about running the other Jellymon cards like the BT9 Tesla Jellymon or the BT9 Jellymon on top of Starling Thunder to be able to bounce the opponent's Tamers back into their hand. Then we have more ways to be able to strip their inheritable sources utilizing the Sora and Joe Tamer, and because we're already a Super Tamer heavy focused deck, we could even spice it up by playing some Vmon cards and running the All-Force Vidramon from BT11 to play our Tamers for free and bounce the opponent's Digimon based on the Tamers that we have. Then as far as some other good bounce removal options, Blue has actually quite a lot of them, but I'm going to be highlighting Full Moon Meteor Impact just because it can reduce its own cost by gaining us memory back for the opponent having a large hand size. Then we do have just a slew of other cards we could think about incorporating into the deck, like utilizing the Promo Zero line, because the Promo Zero line is trying to trash from the top, so even though we're not discarding, it's still trying to fill up our trash either way for a blue deck. Then we do have offensive plug-in, and we could even think about running the Matt and Sora Tamer to be able to splash in some red options just to try to increase the overall offensive capabilities of what the deck is trying to do. Then we do have the floodgates in blue that we can think about utilizing, like BT6 Madoki Betamon and BT5 Siakomon. Then is just some other cute cards we could think about running. We could run the starter deck Cordramon, just because that security Digimon helps us draw cards when it's hit in security and can create a body out of nowhere that the opponent might not be expecting. Then one of the best tech cards that you could think about running in terms of options for utility is going to be win rate 60%, just because we're going to be discarding cards, which is something we already want to be doing inside of the deck to be able to reduce the cost of our Digivolutions, making it a super spicy combo card. And then I did just want to point out some useful potential cards that we could be utilizing to upgrade the deck in BT14. The two most important ones is going to be the Bukamon from BT14, because it's a way for us to apply jamming without the need of a tamer, freeing up extra slots in the deck to run even more possible tech cards. Then the other card I want to highlight is going to be Mental Training, which is going to be one of the training cards to try to help dig out any card of our deck. The reach isn't as good as a memory boost, but it also has a very similar delay ability to be able to not necessarily gain memory, but reduce the cost of our Digivolution, so we can make Digivolving a little bit easier and more efficient. Then we also have the BT14 Gomamon and Zudomon Ace as just other strong synergistic cards with what Jellymon's overall game plan is trying to be. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.